I will use this example to explain one sample t-test. One sample t-test is used to test the mean of a normal distribution. According to the alternative hypothesis, there are three possible scenarios. So basically, you may have a two-sided test like this one, two-sided test, or you may have a one-sided test. So either mu greater than mu zero or mu smaller than mu zero. So basically, the first step to conduct a hypothesis testing is you need to correctly identify which test you want to test. And after that, so the following steps list the steps basically to conduct a hypothesis testing. So first, of course, we need to identify some quantities. Okay, so the important quantity include the sample size n, the sample mean x bar, and sample standard deviation s. No matter which hypothesis you want to test, the way to calculate test statistic is the same. Yeah, so basically, so this one, so t0. You can see, so this x bar is the sample mean, so this s is the sample standard deviation. So this n is sample size. So this mu zero, see, mu zero is here, okay? So basically, whatever you want to test it in your hypothesis. You also need to identify the degrees of freedom. So no matter which hypothesis you are testing, and the degrees of freedom is always n minus 1. So n is the sample size. So after that, to make a conclusion, you need to calculate p-value. So the way to calculate the p-value depends on which hypothesis you are testing, basically according to the alternative hypothesis. Okay, so if you are conducting a two-sided test, so suppose the alternative hypothesis is mu not equal to mu zero. Okay, so then the p-value will be this two-sided. So notice, so this is 2 times, and notice you have absolute value here. Okay, and in fact, we cannot calculate p-value by hand, and we have to use Excel. Okay, so here, so I also write the corresponding Excel function to calculate the p-value. Okay, so according to if the alternative hypothesis is mu greater than mu zero or mu smaller than mu zero, so then we have the corresponding way to calculate the p-value. And also here, I also list the corresponding Excel function. So after you get the p-value, okay, so we compare p-value with alpha. Alpha is a significance level. Usually, so alpha is 5%. So if p-value is smaller than 5% or p-value is smaller than alpha, so we reject h0. And if p-value is greater than alpha, we fail to reject h0. Okay, so let's use the following example as a demonstration. Okay, so in this example, color makers test new recipes for loss of sweetness during storage. So trained testers rate the sweetness before and after storage. Okay, so the following data so include the sweetness loss for testers for a new color recipe. So notice the negative number, so you may notice, so this is negative, right? So negative value indicates an increase of sweetness. So the question is, are these data good evidence that color lost sweetness? Okay, so color lost sweetness. Yeah, because a positive value indicates a loss of sweetness, right? So basically, we just want to test whether mu greater than zero. See, if you want to identify a hypothesis, so usually so we first identify alternative hypothesis. Yeah, because alternative hypothesis is what we want to prove. Okay, so here we want to prove, we want to find evidence for loss of sweetness, right? And the loss of sweetness corresponds to a positive number. So the alternative hypothesis is mu greater than zero. And the non-hypothesis is the complement. Okay, so mu smaller than 0. So now we need to identify the quantities. Okay, so the sample size n equal to 10. So 10 is just the number of data, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? So we have 10 number here. And so then we can calculate the sample mean and the sample standard deviation. Yeah, so for these two calculation, you can use Excel. Okay, so after you identified n sample size and the sample standard deviation, so you can calculate the test statistic, so T0. So X bar is 1.02 the sample mean. So mu zero, we mentioned mu zero is basically what number here, basically in your null hypothesis, right? So here it is 0. And f is the sample standard deviation, right? And so n is sample size. Okay, so after you plug in the value, so then you do the math and you get the test statistic 2.70. So next we want to calculate the p-value. Yeah, so according to here, so we can see basically how to calculate the p-value depend on what your alternative hypothesis is. So now here, our alternative hypothesis is mu greater than 0. Okay, so basically corresponding to B, right? So in this case, so p-value will be the probability greater than our statistic. Yeah, so basically, so here I write p-value is t greater than 2.7. And so we mentioned for p-value, and we cannot do the calculation by hand, and we have to use Excel. And see, so here, so we use this Excel function to calculate the p-value. So basically, so the p-value is 0.0122. And we compare this value with, oh yeah, so I forgot to mention, see, this 9 is the degrees of freedom. Yeah, so basically is a -1, right? Okay, so after that, we compare p-value with a significance level. And so usually, so the alpha is 0.05, right? And so p-value is smaller than alpha, and so we reject H naught, and so we will claim, so there is a good evidence that color loss sweetness during storage.